Hey everybody, Dave Costello here, founder and CEO of Jetpack Workflow and host of Growing Your Firm podcast. Today's guest is Shauna the Tax Goddess. She is the owner of Tax Goddess Business Services, which is a CPA firm located in Scottsdale, Arizona. They're going to talk about how she thinks about distributed teams here in a little bit, but it's a full-service tax and accounting firm with a focus on tax strategy and planning to help lower and minimize taxes for business owners and investors. We see this as a major trend line for firms that are really winning in today's market to kind of think about things around tax strategy and planning. I'm sure we're going to unpack that. We're going to unpack distributed teams and systems and so much more. But first, Shauna, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to talk about this today. It's one of my favorite parts of my practice.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, first question is, was it natural to start calling yourself like Tax Goddess, or you're like, I don't know, should I hold off on this? Is this too much? Right? It's a very bold personality and statement. So was that kind of natural, or did you have to go through like, I'm ready for this?
I was going to say you are dealing with a redhead, so the bold tends to fit in there. But no, what actually happened, so when I first went out into business, I did what everybody else does, right? At the time, it was SWC, Shauna Wekherlien Consulting Business Services or something, right? And I was at a networking event one day and, good or bad, I like to talk to people. So I was talking to the guy sitting next to me and they were passing around a microphone, doing a 60-second commercial thing, right? And I got a tap on the shoulder and a microphone shoved in my face. And I stood up and it just, Shauna the Tax Goddess. And every head in the room spun. And a very good friend of mine, who's like this marketing guru guy, was sitting way in the back and he comes up after and he's like, you're changing the name on everything. That's the name. And so that was probably about 17 years ago now that we changed to Tax Goddess, and we are trademarked and it's our name and that's the deal. So we are Tax Goddess for sure.
I love it. So it was a bold step and then everybody loved it. And you're like, I guess it's sticking, right?
Hard to argue.
Yeah, well, it certainly adds to, I think, the personality of the firm. Do you feel like that's had a material impact on your client acquisition or retention? Or
Absolutely. I think the one that really solidified it for me was I was in the office one day, got a telephone call. I saw your name on the side of your car 4 years ago, and I've never been able to forget taxgoddess.com. And I went, yep. So, oh yes, having a name that somebody can remember that's easy and catchy is the way to go for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And how long have you been doing tax planning? Is that where the firm started, or did that evolve over time?
Evolved over time. Yeah. So the firm will be turning 20 years old next August, right?
Congratulations.
And thank you. I'm super excited. We'll have to come back to that because there's a plan for the global team. We're all going to meet in Thailand is the current plan. I'm super excited. So, but that's a whole separate discussion here. Yeah. We started about 20 years ago. And so me personally, when I started the firm, I was ex-KPMG, right? So I was used to I did taxes and that was it. I prepared taxes. I was high wealth financial planning in KPMG, right? And so that was my specialty. And I didn't know how to send a fax. I didn't know how to do bookkeeping, right? I've never been trained in my entire life. I'd always been tax. And so when I first started the firm, it was me and a secretary, somebody to send the faxes, right? I needed help, handle the paperwork, that kind of thing. And after about 5-6 years, I started noticing this really big hole, right? Like, preparing taxes is fine, but even back then, that was 15 years ago, it was already starting to become a commodity. Plain and simple. All you're doing, air quotes, is taking the information, putting it on a return, spitting out a piece of paper, and the clients just, they'll pay for that because they know they have to, but that's not what they're really looking for. They're looking for guidance and strategies and deep dive detail on questions. That's what they're looking for. And so I started creating, today I would call them mini tax plans. I remember the very first one, I was so nervous because I approached a client and I was going to charge them $1,200 and I was saving them $80,000 on the first plan, right? And now we're charging $80,000, saving $600,000 on plans. So yeah, it's a really fun path. Absolutely. It's my favorite part of our practice. So.
Is that normal or is that, call it, in the ballpark of an average engagement for you now where it's like 80 grand for a tax planning package?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And you're starting to see it. Let me phrase it this way. whenever you start to see ads on Facebook or TV, like you should buy gold, the rush for gold is already done, right? You're the tail end, you're the consumer, and they're trying to really offload the gold, right? That always stuck in my head, right? So right now, if you look at what's happening on Facebook and Twitter, you can sell a tax plan for $8,000. And I'm like, okay, the market is everybody's starting to get into this field, right? So if you're going to get into this field, at this point, I believe it's almost a necessity. If you're not at least doing tax strategy, basic stuff with your clients, they will find somebody who is. I mean, that's the plain and simple of it, right? But if you're in that beginning point now, you're going to need to figure out a niche, and you're going to need to figure out pretty fast where you want to go and what you want to do, and have your marketing targeted to that niche. Because at this point, you now have the professional marketing people. Kevin O'Leary, 2 years ago, just opened, Tax Hive, I think, just opened, and he's a marketing dude, right? So you really need to be getting on that band like now, if you want to, or decide that you're going to stay a volume tax preparation shop, and that's it.
So with competitive pressures coming in the market, are you worried that this is going to be commoditized to the point where you can't charge 80 and you have to do it for 50? Or do you feel like the level of client service will always allow you to have some sort of pricing power?
So I'm going to come at that question from a marketing angle. Everybody says my service is better. They just do, right? So yes, I love our service, and I think Tax Goddess does a really good job, but that is not a marketing pitch in any way to anyone anymore. You can't use it that way. So at some point, do I feel that other people are going to catch up with us? Yes, right. Now, the one thing, and I will caution all the CPAs, anyone listening to this today, please charge what you're worth. Please charge what you're worth, right? Because if you're saving somebody $600,000 and you're charging them $8,000, you are leaving money on the table. Flat out leaving money on the table. I'm telling you, and we've got the proof to back it up, right? We are saving, our average is about $600,000 a year. Our average price is about $80,000. And I feel like I'm leaving money on the table. And the clients are thrilled, because if I can never guarantee, right? But if effectively I'm guaranteeing $600,000 for $80,000, why would you not invest that? So please charge what you're worth, right? And I know that's scary for a lot of CPAs. I'm friends with many, many, many CPAs, and I'm a CPA myself, right? It's scary the first time you approach somebody and say, pay me $80,000. But the day you file that tax return and they're not paying $600,000, they've told every friend, and every friend of theirs will pay you $80,000. So please charge what you're worth.
Absolutely. You said something really interesting, which I also think is somewhat unusual, was you took my question and you said, well, it's kind of a, pricing, these are my words, obviously not yours, is a matter of positioning and how you're thinking about your marketing message, which is pretty atypical, I would say at the very least, to kind of take it in that direction. So unless, KPMG has kind of a marketing system or mindset they infuse into, people that work there, I guess, barring that, where did you pick up that mentality? Was there a book or a person that you came across to start thinking about marketing and positioning in a very strategic way?
Absolutely. And I hope everybody enjoys this comment I'm about to say. It all started with Tim Ferriss, 4-Hour Workweek, in a footnote of that book, not the digital book. So side note, if you got the digital copy, go get the paper copy. Okay. There was a footnote, and it started with, right, the footnote was talking about using a digital scheduling system. Instead of having your secretary call and confirm the day before on an appointment, right, have this link, and the link will automatically send a reminder. And I know that's not necessarily marketing and specific, but that one little tiny footnote completely changed my outlook on how you run a business. Because you're right, KPMG taught me how to be a CPA. Taught me how to be technical, taught me how to really dig into details and research and all those kinds of things, right? But running the business of being a CPA is a completely different animal. And if you, as the owner of your practice, if you are spending 10, 12 hours a day doing the technical work, you have zero time to even think about marketing, systems, expansion, hiring, any of the rest of that stuff. And not necessarily that everyone wants to do that, right? Some people, I've got a very good friend of mine, it's him and his wife, and he loves it. And that's what he does. And he sits across the desk and he talks to the people and he does the return. and he's happy, and that's fine, right? Maybe the downsides to being, I have an entrepreneurial mother and entire family for 800 years, and maybe it's just part of the blood, right? But for me, growing and learning and knowing all of these pieces has been able to make my practice bigger, stronger, better, faster. So going kind of back to your comment, am I worried about competitors coming in? No, because I will always find the next thing that's 10 years ahead of everyone else. So.
And I want to dig into that, but would you say Tim is also where you picked up the marketing mindset too?
It was the beginning. Because I devoured that book. I mean, I reread that book every single year for the last, 10, 15 years that thing's been out. I mean, forever, right? That's been out. I reread it every single year. And even still to this day, I mean, I know so many of the words by heart out of that book. No, you're getting me all worked up about it. I love it. Even though I know many of those words by heart, every time I read it, my perception and what I've learned from year to year has changed. And so something else now triggers, right? And I will absolutely say that was the beginning of the journey. I mean, I've done, what's his name? Chris Voss, Black Swan negotiation. I've done E5 from Todd Brown. I've worked with Dan Henry. I've worked, some of these huge names that are big on education, right? And they all educate you in different ways, right? Operations, marketing, sales, whatever, right? But to me, that goes back to the comment of how much time have you left yourself to do that? Because if you're working 10, 12 hours a day, 14 hours a day, and you're passing out in bed, you haven't even eaten, how are you ever going to spend time learning about anything to grow? There's no way.
Yeah. And I will say the 4-hour work week, this is not the right word because it's obviously sold millions and millions of copies and it has thousands of positive reviews, but it's really an underrated, enduring business book, really behind that title. And I think you're right. It is something to kind of pick up, and there's so many little frameworks and nuggets in that book. It's fantastic. I remember, there would be a little thing, and it was something around, I don't know if he used the word hacking, if that was like in vogue at that point or not, of speed reading. He was like, and this, by the way, is how I learned how to speed read. And so anyways, it's a really, really fun book. But I want to transition a bit. You said, if people come in and they try to drive what I'm doing to a commodity level, I know where the trend's going. I know where the puck is moving, and I'm going to go where the puck is going versus where it's at today. And so when you think about your, I'll call it data or media intake, I guess, what gives you that confidence? Are there certain sites or books or people you follow that allow you to see what's around the corner? Or, what kind of drives that?
That is an excellent question. So for me, I am actually a part of the sales team within Tax Goddess. So for me, what's driving that knowledge is, of course, not only going out and reading and articles and seeing what's going on, but I would think it's actually more from every time I talk to a client, I learn more about what are they hearing in the marketplace? What else are they seeing? Who else are they comparing us against? What are their concerns? And how are the other people not addressing those concerns? So by being a part of the sales process, I'm actually able to pick up on the live data today, what's going on, just because I'm talking to people nonstop. So
that's brilliant. That is so brilliant. I love that answer. But I have to ask, because it sounds a little unusual. Did you always love sales? Like, why keep you? I feel okay.
I think
we just lost half the audience, Shauna.
I know. Well, and it's hard to say I don't. I can't lie and say no, I didn't ever love sales. Let me back up, because I think the word sales gets a very bad rep, right? Because people think sales and they go, "Ooh, slimy, pushy. I'm trying to force something on somebody." No. The reason why I love sales is because I get to learn in detail, in depth, my client. What are your pains? What are your passions? What do you want? Do you want to start a charity? Do you want to start a business? Do you want to live overseas? Like I'm getting goosebumps even just talking about it. Okay. For me, it's not sales, because what am I doing? I'm building a relationship with my client. And as a CPA, at the heart of CPAs, I know for some people, it can be very hard to have that the more relationship and a little less transactional. But I do honestly believe that at the heart of most CPAs, we want to help our clients. That's why we became fiduciaries, right? It's very important for us to do what is best for our clients. And in the ability to have those conversations, sales just kind of comes along naturally because when somebody feels like they're connected to you and that you have a vested interest in what they're doing, they're much more likely to want to work with you than anyone else. So the sales process just kind of happens naturally. I mean, there certainly is a lot of sales tactics and techniques and how do you raise your prices and how do you do all this kind of stuff. And that can be hard. It's hard for me too. We just changed our sales process and it's a little scary, right? For like 2 weeks, I was like, is this going to work? Is it okay? Right? So it happens to all of us. But I do honestly believe that at the core of it, as CPAs, we want to help people. And by having honest, real discussions and deep diving on somebody's life, you will be able to help them more because you know more about what they want and who they are. So
yeah, that makes perfect sense. Well, to transition a little bit, but it's in line, I think, with the Tim Ferriss 4-Hour Work Week. So when it was written in 2006, there's really talking about these eye-opening concepts. I think Thomas Friedman wrote this book called The World is Flat. I want to say it's like 2003, 2004, about how FedEx was becoming heavily distributed and just there was a sea shift going on economically for distributed workforce and systems and teams. Mm-hmm. Tim comes out with his book. He starts talking about how he's using the system, building out his like assistant network or his team. It seems like you've really kind of put rocket fuel to a lot of these concepts. So to set the stage, walk us through how big's the team and kind of where are they distributed today over the world?
Absolutely. So as of last week, when I got our most current count, we now have 89 team members. We have 7 of them here in the US, but they're all across the US. Everyone else, we are in 20 countries across the globe. So we have large chunks in India and the Philippines, but we also have Uganda, Kenya, Egypt, Pakistan, Colombia. We've got people all over the globe from that standpoint.
So then how does the org chart kind of then run down? The 7 in the US, if you will, what are their, do they have a consistent role and responsibility, or is it kind of dispersed? Like how are you thinking about managers for different team members, and then when do you decide somebody in the US versus somebody overseas? Like how do you think about these differences?
So I'm going to start with that last question first. Okay. So in my mind, and it might make sense for me to tell you the story of how we got here, so I'll get to that too. But in my mind, US overseas makes zero difference. None. Not a lick. Okay. So for example, my second in command in the company, my head of operations, is in Uganda. Fine. The reason why he's in Uganda is because that's where he lives. I don't really care where he is. He got to become my second in command because he's good, he's smart, he's talented, he's brilliant, he thinks about the future. Like, to me, it doesn't matter where somebody is. It matters more what kind of skill set are they bringing to the company.
I think that's the punchline, because most people will say, okay, I'm going to build out a local base and then we're going to hire overseas. But the fact your number 2 is in Uganda, how did you find him?
Oh, honey, that's a story. I'll tell you. Okay. Well, so I'll back up and I'll just give the very, very brief story. Okay. So about 9 years ago now, we just went overseas about 9 years ago. Okay. I guess it's no longer just. We went overseas about 9 years. But at the time, I had a fully 100% Scottsdale, Arizona. I owned the building, all of my team, I had 15, 20 people at the time. Everybody came to the office every day, like standard brick and mortar CPA firm. Okay. And long story short, my favorite senior tax reviewer, right? Because I love doing the sales stuff, right? And my favorite senior tax reviewer, he was older, came to me after tax season and said, that's it, I'm done. I'm retiring. And it felt like a knife in the heart because I'm like, right? Like I freaked out, right? What else was it going to do? Now, at the time, I was paying $85 an hour, US, full benefits, right? Like this was the deal for a senior reviewer. So we started searching. Okay, I posted an ad in Arizona, couldn't find anyone. We posted an ad for all of Arizona, like north, south, like all the cities, Arizona, couldn't find anyone. Posted for the West Coast, posted for the entire US. Okay, so during this entire process, this was like a 4-month process. We had interviewed and hired 2 or 3 people. One lady, I'll never forget it. We interviewed her and we said, okay, great, we're doing Zoom, right? Interviewed her and I said, great, so can you double click on that folder and open up that file? Let me see. She's like, double click? I'm like, okay, yeah, no, never mind, right? I mean, didn't know how to double click a folder. I'm like, okay. So I went out to lunch with a very good friend of mine, and his practice, 3,000 1040 returns, big practice. but I had only ever seen him and his wife in his office ever, right? Like, how are you finding anybody? I can't find a reviewer. The big firms have eaten up all the really good people. They're paying like $200 an hour. Like, I'm small. I can't compete with that. What am I supposed to do? And he just laughed. He said, well, I have an entire team in India. I'm like, hello, you've been holding out on me? What are you doing? So he connected me with our very first people in India, who is actually now my head of tax, right? I mean, he's my main guy. And again, it really just kind of launched from there. And that's when I realized I don't need American overseas. Like, it doesn't matter, right? What I'm looking for is the skill set that can get my clients what I need for my clients. So, for example, we're in the middle right now of hiring a SALT expert, state and local taxation expert. And we've got something like 80 resumes from 60 different countries. I don't care where you are, as long as you know what I need you to know, and you can work in a team, and you're a good person, and background checks and all that kind of stuff. So,
are there specific job boards or do you have to do single point in different territories? Like, or is there one that just helps you go across the board for remote, global, distributed accounting and finance talent?
The easiest one for somebody who's never done this before, if this is your very first hire, okay, I would recommend that you go look at something called Upwork. Upwork. I think they just merged with WeWork or something. There might be a name change or something, but it's a job board. It's a global job board, right? You can post any job you're looking for. You can also see all the ratings and histories and reviews on a particular contractor. Okay. And especially when it's your very first hire, it's scary, right? Now, Upwork also takes care of all your payment requirements. They do background checks. So for a brand new person, Upwork is probably the place to start. Okay. At this point of our team, Tax Goddess has 3 HR people, and they post to specific job boards. Is that the one downside to Upwork? It's just a little bit more expensive. Now, let me back up. I was kind of talking rates earlier, right? 85 to 120. Okay. A little bit more expensive might be $20 an hour instead of $15 an hour. So either way, it's not even close to what you're paying in the US. It won't make any difference if it's your first, I'd say your first 10 hires, Upwork is probably fine.
And with the distributed team in so many different time zones, what have you found to be the best way to think about communication? Is it largely asynchronous, or do folks overseas kind of have an overlap with local time? What have you found to kind of be most effective on that front?
Yeah, so both, actually. Okay, so we do have a mandatory overlap time for anyone joining the firm, period. And that's Arizona from 8 until noon. So India, for example, where our largest population of staff is from, is exactly 12 and a half hours off from Arizona. So 8 to 12 a.m. is 8 to midnight. For most people, especially in the countries where they're used to working on US staff work, whatever it is, they're used to working the night shift. So for them, this 4-hour overlap time is great because they can work their time and then take a break and then work our time. But the overlap time is most important for us because our staff deals directly with our clients, which means we're not having our clients meet with somebody at 8 p.m. at night because it's their morning. You're going to meet Arizona time when the Arizona clients we work on all the US clients, right? But when the US clients are around. So for a big part, we have that 4-hour mandatory overlap, right? And that's just part of the job description. You want the job here, this is what it is. And then we also do asynchronous using Slack, which is our favorite tool for communication. It's absolutely brilliant from that standpoint.
Are there standard cadences or rhythms that you drop into Slack, or is it just whenever there's an update, whenever you need somebody, just ping them?
Yeah. Well, and so we really, outside companies call Tax Goddess a power user. We have literally broken software with the things that we try to do. So automations, the way we want channels set up, the way we do these kinds of things, right? But again, absolutely, when you're first starting, Slack just as a pure method to keep everybody on the same page and keep transparency. I think that's one of the biggest things about having a global company is you have to have transparency. So if you and I have a one-on-one meeting and we do it in some private channel, but it might impact marketing, admin, programming, whatever, right? They need to see it too. So one of the benefits of having Slack is that everybody can see what's going on.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, you have a head of operations. You love sales. I guess one of my final questions is, what's at 89 people, and it seems like growing pretty well. What's your typical week look like? If there's a pie chart of your time, how is it being sliced now?
Ooh, of my time being sliced now. Okay. So I still love sales. So I'd say probably about 20% in sales. Let's see if I can add this up. The downside to being a CPA without a 10P. Okay. So 20% for sales. I'd say 50% in meetings. So meeting with, we call them HODs, department heads, right? So 50% in meetings, maybe 20% on communication. So Slack, following up what's going on, what's happening in the company, just kind of keeping my thumb on things. That is a very bad habit that I'm trying to work myself out of, because technically my department heads should be managing their departments. But, Tax Goddess is still my baby, right? So it's still something I love. And then I would say the other 10% is probably marketing stuff. So, being the goddess herself, right? I do a lot of the YouTube videos. I do a lot of the interviews. I do a lot of that kind of thing. So
these department head meetings, what's the rough agenda that these look like?
So I have a meeting with each of my department heads at least once a month. If they don't need me for anything else, fine. The agenda is, so what's going on in your team? Like what's progress has been made? What projects are you working on? That kind of thing. Do you have any concerns about any of your staff members? Right. So there's a lot of discussion about HR and how to manage and train and that kind of thing. And then thirdly, do you need anything from me as the owner? Do you need a budget? Do you need a new hire? Do you need whatever?
And is that a skip level meeting, or do those department heads report right up to you anyways, or do they report to your head of operations typically?
At the moment, they report to me. This is, okay. I think a lot of it, realize, as I said, I started with me and a secretary, right? So a lot of this, my head of operations could absolutely handle. Am I ready to let it go?
Maybe not yet.
On it, right? Not yet. Do I trust my team? Absolutely, hands down. Let me say it this way. Last year, I moved into a new house. I took a month off. A month. I didn't look at anything. I didn't talk to clients. I didn't talk to my HODs. I didn't do a damn thing. And when I came back, Rome had not burned. It was all good. There were no problems, no client issues, no nothing. My team is amazing, but you got to give them the freedom to do that. And I'm just holding on to those last little bits, right? Because otherwise, honestly, I don't know what I would do with myself. So start a new business, I guess. I don't know.
Well, I think this is a great place to wrap it up. If somebody's listening and they're like, I would love to have that problem, or you just really enjoyed this interview, Shauna, what's the best way for our audience to connect with you?
Absolutely. So we actually help other CPA firms do this kind of stuff and build these systems. So easiest way to find us is taxgoddessinternational.com. You can chat with us. You can download our 10 ways to go digital little PDF thing that our marketing team created. Really for me, I remember being the CPA that didn't know how to send a fax, and it was scary and it was overwhelming and I didn't know what to do. And to be able to bring even the now basic knowledge of, let's hire you one admin team member. Let's hire you one marketing person to handle your social media. Let's just try one tax preparer to get some stuff off your plate. That kind of stuff really brings me a lot of joy, because it means that I get to give a little bit of freedom back to the CPA to do what most CPAs love to do, which is help their client really, really, instead of just pounding on the keyboard. So.
Amazing. Well, if you couldn't jot down everything that Shauna was talking about today, we're going to link everything up at jetpackworkflow.com/blog. That's jetpackworkflow.com/blog. If you enjoyed this interview, leave a review. It helps us get the word out. If you really enjoyed it, there is a shift in how you think about the future of your firm. Share it with a fellow firm owner that needed to hear something that Shauna mentioned today. I know that's the best way to say thank you to myself and to her for spending the time with us today. Shauna, thanks again for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been such a pleasure.